Welcome to the BadgerCast, where we talk about Bitcoin, yield farming, and the future of decentralized finance. My name is Wasabi Research. Nothing you're about to hear is investment, financial, or spiritual advice, but merely the personal opinions of a rotating cast of internet badgers. Check us out and learn how to put your crypto to work at www.badger.com. Welcome to the BadgerCast. This is a very special pre-June 30th Convex Unlockening edition of the BadgerCast. I've managed to grab Tritium for just a few minutes, and we are calling this episode bveCVX, the very extremely super hard sell edition. It's going to be just kind of hard-hitting, going through the benefits of bveCVX, what's happening with the unlockening, and why we think you should consider depositing in it after this unlock. So Tritium, thanks for doing this today, and let's dive into it.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm smoking a joint today, so I'm a little more chill. It's like joints and bveCVX. Let's do it.
So what we're doing today is reintroducing bveCVX. So we put out a kind of FAQ style article that goes through the main features, but let's assume someone has been busy living their life and didn't read that article. So can you give just a quick summary of what is bveCVX and who is it for? Who is like the target customer for it?
Sure. So bveCVX is for somebody that wants to like make money on their CVX and wants to have as little UX challenges as possible around locking, right? So it means that you don't want to have to schedule a date to come and relock your tokens, right? And that it possible, like you want to sell when you want to sell. And so I would say that like in that regard, that tends to be for depositors right now, like based on the size of it, right? Like if you're depositing more than 5 to 10% of the pool, right, you're not going to get that liquidity proposition so well, or it's going to take you time to exit. But I think, and don't quote me on it, but I do imagine that, at 2.5 to 5% of the pool max, you should be able to have a reasonable amount of liquidity, right? And to set and forget that investment, and then maybe take a little bit of time when you want to exit to make sure you do it well, but not have it be a big ordeal. And then on the upside, like you don't have to come back to Convex and lock every 16 weeks. You don't have to deal with the bribes. It's just everything's handed for you.
All right. And one of the kind of interesting features that I think we haven't highlighted as much as we should is the auto voter and bribe processor, especially how it relates to the kind of handcuffs that it puts on a multi-sig. So, it's not someone with an EOA or a multi-sig running around doing everything manually. It's quite highly automated and strict about how it works, and trying to move as close to full trustless decentralization as possible. So can you talk a little bit about the work that went into that piece of it?
Sure. So like the big challenge with Convex is snapshot, right? So when you go to snapshot, you vote, you don't pay any gas. That's all off chain. And then curve emissions are on chain. So like there is a snapshot vote, and then at Convex there's a multi-sig, I think, yeah, it must be, right? That is translating that snapshot to a curve vote, right? Probably through some sort of a structured contract. Maybe, I'm not sure about Convex's architecture. There's this reality engine from Gnosis or that you can use that I think is able to read snapshots. So but there's some trickiness there. And then like voting on snapshot is something that like right now can only be done by Gnosis multisig, which requires like people to sign it or on chain. So the way that our auto voter works right now is that we have a bot that runs that calculates everything. It processes the best bribes. We blacklist things that like we really think are like super liquid or that are like difficult to sell on ETH. And then basically it just automatically allocates the votes, and that's running like every hour during the vote period to constantly kind of rebalance. And so that actually is an EOA. It's in a very secure key store that like I think it would be very difficult for anyone to access, although a few members of the team could. Yeah, and that's voting like that. Like in the future, we could have a multi-sig cast that vote. So that bot could, propose to a multi-sig or could propose to a contract whereby there could be a vetoer. But the complex thing about kind of thinking about vetoing and like decentralized and how you make sure that vote is correct is that like probably the worst thing that could happen is for you to not vote at all. So like we're slowly working on trying to figure out how to decentralize that voting now, but right now it's being done like according to like well tested logic that's been running for a long time. Yeah, and is operated by Badger DAO. Then that those votes result in bribes which are earned, right? So I think this is where Badger's technology is really the most like decentralized and trustless. So the way that that works is that when bribes are earned, they all get sent to this bribe processor contract, which allows the Badger multisig to sell those bribes for ETH and then sell all of that ETH for some mix of bveCVX and Badger, right? And then emit that to holders, minus a set fee to the DAO, right? But if you go look at that contract, what you'll see is that the ability of the multisig is very bounded in that they can't take the tokens and transfer them somewhere else. There's a very limited scope in which it can be operated, right? But it still allows the multi-sig to ensure that like pricing is correct and that like things aren't getting rugged by MEV. So like that, like we find that to be pretty advanced. We're also working on trying to figure out how to make that like more automated and more permissionless. But I think like that's the thing that separates us from Union, is that like bveCVX, like the rewards that you get, we're really working to handle in the most permissionless way possible. And because Union gets all of the votes, like anybody can bribe anything and then somebody's going to vote for it and Union has to sell it. Right. And so what that means is that at least some of the tokens they have to move to an EOA and figure out how to bridge to some other chain or how to like do something with. And so, yeah, I guess, yeah, that's what I would say, right? Is that like it is as decentralized as it can be. And like we've got people that are constantly focused on trying to push that forward.
And there's another piece of this where if there, can you tell me about this? How the Badger system selects or can kind of blacklist tokens from voting that it thinks will be difficult to process or require, bridging, or there's not that much liquidity on Ethereum. How does that work, and how has that kind of saved users from some hassles or kind of potential pitfalls?
Yeah, so well, like before we had the auto voter, at the very beginning, like I was just voting, right? And so like my logic would be I go look at all the bribes, and when you're voting with a million plus votes, you can't just vote for one thing because you dilute it. But I would kind of try to find like 4 or 5 big bribes and then spread the votes out across them, right? And then the Luna bribe came up. And the challenge with the Luna bribe is it's like, then the next question is I'm getting all these tokens, like, can I sell them, right? Like if I'm going to get $100,000 in Luna or $200,000 in Luna, right? Like how much slippage am I going to see on chain if I try to swap that? And so in the case of Luna, it was this Luna wormhole and all the liquidity was on Terra. So the only way to really sell the Luna without getting wrecked was to, like put it, bridge it to Terra, sell it there, and then bridge it back to ETH. And like that's something that, first of all, it's just an incredible pain in the butt. And second of all, it's really, really hard to do in a decentralized way. So like as we were designing the auto voter, we designed it with the capability to be able to blacklist tokens. So basically we watch the bribes, the community is willing to watch the bribes, right? But we keep an eye open. And if we see new bribes come up, we just take a minute to verify that like, is the liquidity available on chain like sufficient for the amount that we're expecting to earn to like sell it without getting wrecked by 10%. And then if so, we generally vote for it, right? The other thing is that we only vote for I think like 5 or 6 or 7 pools, so we only vote for the top pools, which generally means that like we're not voting for something where we're getting like $10,000 of some like very very low MCAP coin that like made a small bribe, right? So it tends to mean that we tend to get larger market cap coins that can make larger bribes that I think like tend to be more stable on the market.
All right, now let's talk about fees. So I have, if you are not following us with this article, it's if you go to badger.com/news, reintroducing bveCVX, we have a little breakdown of the fees. But I think it's helpful to kind of go through each component of the fees and talk about why it is there and what it's doing, because it's not like we just kind of put in the fees willy nilly. They have specific purposes and are designed in some cases to support key features of bveCVX that redound to the benefit of users, and it's not just kind of going into the DAO's pocket. So let's go through these kind of one by one. So there is a 0.1% of assets, of total assets of bveCVX withdrawal fee. So why is that there, and why is that kind of like a blanket fee that we have to have on all the different vaults?
Okay, so like Vaults One is pretty old tech, and part of the way that it's based is with just like a lot of controls to try to like prevent any possible rug, even though like maybe it would or would not be possible, right? But there's just a bunch of very like general protections in place. Um, yeah, and so like those include like block lock, which means that you can't interact with the same vault twice on the same block, right? And not allowing any smart contracts to interoperate with it, which basically prevents any kind of like flash loan attacks or that kind of ARB thing. Um, the other part of that is a withdrawal fee that like means that you have to like pay to withdraw in order to get your money out, which kind of means that like if you were to try to ape in real quick right before a harvest and claim all of the rewards you couldn't, and it also deals with some other potential economic attacks. So uh, bveCVX is still built on this code, and the other, I guess, one of those restrictions is that that withdrawal fee. So bveCVX charges a 0.1% withdrawal fee, which is fundamentally just to kind of protect the vault from people trying to like fiddle with the distribution of yields.
Okay.
Yeah,
So this would be for someone who tries to deposit and then harvest, or deposit and withdraw right after the harvest. It makes it
right. So if you
economically
were gonna like
not
deposit
viable.
and then like if you thought the part, or even if you're a MEV and you see the deposit happening and on that block, right, you just insert two transactions, right, one right before and one right after, to deposit an incredible amount of bveCVX, which again doesn't lock right away, right? So in one block those tokens aren't locked, and if all the rewards are being distributed at once, you can potentially like steal that money, right? Which you've already dealt with in emissions. But the point is that we're at a point where like we're getting past that problem. That's why that's there, and it's also just kind of part of the fees, and it's pretty minimal. And again, I think for us, like bveCVX isn't meant to be something that like you're trading, right? It's meant to be something that you spend some time in, and then 0.1% should be pretty inconsequential.
And the other fees are what we call vote influence fees. So these are not actual assets that are taken out of the vault or taken away from the bribes that are received, but are they're taken away from the overall total of the bribe harvest? Or are they taken in the form of the vote itself?
Well, I mean, technically a little bit of both, right? So the concept is, you know, bveCVX doesn't make much in performance fees, right? It pays, I don't know, like 2 to 5% in CRV, right? And like one option would be to take all of that, but like is the DAO, and for a lot of reasons, right? The more interesting thing to do is the vote. So the vote fees come out of the vote. So if bveCVX has a million CVX, right, then 15% of that is 150,000 CVX. 5% of that is 5,000 CVX. And then those votes are allocated to something, which I think in this case, like one of, well, yeah, let's just go through them, right? So the first one is an operational fee for the DAO, right? Like that's to pay us. Um, and so that actually also votes for bribes, and then a portion of the bribes in the end are directed by the processor to the DAO, right? So that's just kind of calculated out in math. We take less than 5% but we take 5% of the 85%. Anyway, yeah, we take 5% and that goes through this bribes process, right? Then the other 10%, 5% of it goes to support bveCVX liquidity. So if you go on the Badger app, like you can get generally better yields. It depends on how much liquidity there is. but there's pretty good yields on liquidity, which is why you can trade. So basically, you're paying 5% of your emissions in order to allow this liquidity, which again, I think when the market is up, from what I've seen, generally allows of like swapping out about, yeah, 2, 2, 3% of the pool without like real big slippage, like over the course of a few weeks. And then the third one is this Badger WBTC liquidity. So what we're emitting is 75% bveCVX and 25% Badger. Um, Badger holders are looking for like fees to help them, and there's this question about how do we emit more, but we're not looking to emit Badger. So this is a way that we take fees and we basically directly create emissions on a curve pool that Badger holders are then able to go farm. So basically that equates to, I think, what do you know what the yields are right now, Wasabi? But I think like usually between 15 and 25% yields on curve that you can then farm your Badger emissions on.
Yep. Yeah, no, I don't have that in front of me, but that sounds directionally accurate. So let me just try to sum this up. So of the primary fees, except for this 0.1% withdrawal fee for the security reasons, the primary fees are taken in terms of the vote weight of your CVX vote. And 5% of that is to support the actual liquidity of bveCVX. So normally, if you're locking CVX, you're locked up for 16 weeks, and that's a hard lock. You cannot transfer the tokens in any way. But because we have this curve pool of CVX, bveCVX, that allows some people to swap out in a limited way, and we'll talk more about that in depth later. But so 5% is a fee, but it's taken to basically support the product itself because it's kind of
It's supporting
underwriting
liquidity.
a key
That's
feature
why
of the
liquidity.
product.
Yep.
And then the other 5% fee is to support the liquidity of Badger token, which is a key part of the reward mix of bveCVX. So it's supporting that liquidity of Badger, which is kind of a win-win. If you're, in the Badger ecosystem, you want to support liquidity for Badger because you're also earning that as a reward.
Yeah. And creates a flywheel, right? Because then you can put that in our vault, you can get all of the boosts, and then that's giving you more bveCVX, which is all kind of like feeding back in on itself, right? So that also kind of is part of this whole Badger flywheel where if you invest in HODL and all of these vaults, they're all kind of designed to interoperate such that you're building all of these assets over time without like a whole lot of trading.
And then the final fee is the DAO fee. Badgers, we got to eat,
That's the money
you
we
know.
make. We take
Yep.
5%. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about liquidity. So, of the managed CVX products, um, Badger is one of the, I believe, two that offers a way to exit early from CVX, which is particularly important if you're in a bear market or you're anticipating more choppy waters ahead, and you don't want to be subject to that 16-week lockup. So, talk to me a little bit about the liquidity. How does it work? What are the limitations of it? How well has it performed over time?
Well, okay. So I talked about this a little bit more in my that office hours of bveCVX, but basically like liquidity's always been tricky. What's interesting is now because the amount of emissions, because the rewards for liquidity is a function of the size of bveCVX and the rewards, right? What that tends to mean is that when CVX is doing good, right, when there's more rewards flowing, then the yields are higher, right? There's less sell pressure on bveCVX, and then there generally tends to be more liquidity and closer to peg in the Badger pool, right? So functionally, what I've seen, and this is not like, don't quote me on this. This is just anecdotal from typing it in a few times. But like when things are good, right? Like you can sell 100,000 CVX for less than like a 1% discount, or bveCVX for CVX. So like you can exit with 100K to 150K pretty easily, right? And then what tends to happen is when things are not so good, right? Then people do that before you, and then it's not, then you can exit with a little and pay a bit of slippage, but like if you yeah, but there's actually not that much left in the pool. So what it really does is provides the ability to like exit when the market is good, which I actually think is the smart way to trade, and also kind of like enforces good discipline. So like I think we're pretty looking at it right. That system has stayed in line and created a pretty interesting like incentive system there that I think works well.
Yeah, and this is kind of an interesting feature, but I think it's important to highlight like the way that this pool is engineered, right? Just because we set up a pool and whacked some CVX into it and bveCVX doesn't mean that peg is or that pool is going to stay balanced. So when each cycle, when we run this bribe system, it's taking the harvested bribes, selling them back into bveCVX through this pool, and that's what's putting buy pressure on the bveCVX side of the pool to keep it in balance with convex, right?
Correct.
Let's talk about the new UI that we're building. So, hopefully, by the time this podcast is up, if you go to app.badger.com and click on the bveCVX vault, you will see a beautiful new interface up there. What are some of the things that will tell you that are not being displayed today?
Okay, so like Badger traditionally has run yield farming vaults that deposit something and like either dump or stake and re-emit, right? Whatever emissions come out. And then like bveCVX is very different, right? Because most of the returns come from votes and bribes, and there's like a lot more going on. So, and then the other challenge is actually understanding the performance of these things, right? Everybody shows these yields, but in the case of bveCVX or in the case of convex locking and bribe farming in general, there's a million factors and like everything's like summarized in ways that don't really make sense. And like none of these ROI numbers actually seem to people or to me to add up to like exactly what you see at any given moment in time. And so we're trying to like show more about what this is in a holistic way on this new set page. So the things that we've added is a better breakdown of the fees that we've already discussed, right? And then we show there at the moment how much what the slippage is to sell your bveCVX. So it says like, hey, you can sell your bveCVX for 1% or for 98% of its value right now, right? Just to make it very clear that like and there's links to it and it's just easy to find because support gets asked this like every day. Um, and then on the bottom, we have a little section that actually graphs per bribe session. It looks a little bit like the union thing, but like per bribing round, how much was paid out per CVX or per 100 CVX, right? So it says for this one, we're still kind of discussing whether that should be in like USD value at that time or native tokens, and we may adjust it a little bit over time. But fundamentally, what you're seeing is that okay, like in this, in this round, about this much USD value and these tokens were emitted at this mix of tokens, right? And again, it's a graph, it's like a bar chart, but what it does is allows people that like actually want to understand how this thing's performing to go and look and understand like where their yields are coming from, which I think is the biggest question that everybody really has in trying to understand bveCVX. And yeah, and like once it's up, it'll also look over time, so you'll also be able to look at the historical performance, right, and compare that to maybe a similar bar chart on. No, I don't know if Llama has such a chart, but you can compare it to like other returns or get a sense of what's really going on.
All right, so that is an overview of the product. Let's talk about what's happening on June 30th.
I talked about it recently in an office hours, but basically about 16 weeks ago, I guess 15 weeks ago, 15 and a half weeks ago, um, Convex ended up unlocking all of their tokens at once, and then a whole lot of people relocked it. So at this point, I think around 25 million, like within a million or two of that, 25 million Convex are unlocking all in the same week. And yeah, and that's like really about like more than 25% of the like total supply that's on the market right now. So it's a pretty significant additional amount of liquidity to suddenly flush onto the market.
So there have been some interesting threads on Twitter about whose coins are unlocking, what people are going to do with them. I know a big chunk is owned by Terra Luna, so that's a question mark around what they're going to do. Like, what? Give me your best guess about how these big protocols will unlock. Do you think there's going to be other protocols on the other side of this, just kind of waiting to scoop up cheap CVX, or what's your best guess as to how it'll play out?
So yeah, I mean it's interesting, right? Like there's two sets of questions, right? One is a little bit about who might sell CVX, like Terra Luna, right? And then the other one is maybe a question about who could buy CVX. Let me just open this. Like, what is it? Dow Wars. Okay, so if you go to Dow Wars.xyz, Convex Wars, I just found the site, right? So we can see who the top holders are. So let's just kind of go through them. So C2TP, top holder. I think he's going to relock. If he's smart, he'll do it slowly, but we'll see. And I think there's about a 50% chance that he'll do it over like a month, and there's maybe a 50% chance that he'll do it right away. And I think because he's concerned about governance, like the thing that would force C2 to lock quickly would be if there was some gauge vote, or like if he thought that there was something coming up that he thought it was important to vote on.
All right, makes sense.
Frax, I think Frax is convex, convex is Frax. Like they're locked into a thing. I think there's no question that they'll relock what they have, probably all right away. Maybe they'll do it over 2 weeks. I haven't looked if there's a vote on that first week. I don't know if how much convex Frax will buy or curve. But I could imagine that they would be buying some. And do you notice Frax vote with curve?
No, I don't look at their curve voting.
So then, yeah, like that would be a good indicator. Um, but I think there's a good chance that if Convex is cheap, Frax will scoop some up. I don't think that they're in like a great financial position right now to just try to like buy all the Convex, though. I guess that's kind of my thoughts about Frax.
All right. Next is looks just like a unlabeled wallet. The next two.
Yeah, so those are like random whales, right? And yeah, like those are the real big questions, right? And who knows what they'll do? I think at least one of them is also on the Convex team or is also associated with the protocol. And so I imagine at least one of those will relock.
I'm just
Uh,
looking at their wallets. A lot of stablecoin maximalists in here.
yeah, they're farming their stables, and if they're still trying to farm their
Yeah.
stables and they're like curve maxis, then like the question is, do they want to readjust their portfolio? It's the interesting thing to me about these holders, just to start selling bveCVX, right? Is that, and I guess like with this much CVX, it's too much. But like if you drop a few 100,000 bveCVX in LP, right, that's going to generate a bunch more bveCVX, which will like increase the rewards for LP, or you find like the right balance there, and then you're locked, but you've got also some like liquidity, right? And so like the thing about like bveCVX liquidity is that when bveCVX is or when CVX is down, right? Like when it's down hard, then like the discount is big or the premium is big and it costs a lot to sell. But like if you're a holder that like wants to exit, at the top or exit sometimes at the top or when things are going well, then usually like bveCVX offers, like again, maybe not millions, but 100,000 a month or so, I think is safe to say, even at like the current AUM of ability to like exit. And so I think like again, maybe not for like 2.2 million, but for like a few 100,000 to like maybe like half a million, like that's worth looking at because there is some versatility there.
All right. Then we've got Terra.
And then yeah, who knows? Like my guess is they have to sell it, right? Maybe they won't do anything with it. It would be really like brash to relock it, but this is Duquan we're talking about. So, I don't know, dude. Like, what do you think?
I don't know. But I would want to look at what's happening with, Terra Luna 2.0. Is that just down only? Like, are they actually getting any traction there? I, my, superficial understanding is it hasn't really gone anywhere. So I would not be expecting big moves on their part. Yeah. But I have, there was also this story today that they just have a bunch of huge wallets just sitting out there doing nothing. And they're kind of in just like figuring stuff out mode. So I could see them just holding.
Yeah, I mean that's my question. My question there is like who is the rightful owner of that value, right? Like, is this something that like at this point, like there's a strong thing that says like, hey, this should go back to the people that lost their money, or has all of that like rolled into yeah, like the new Terra. And then you're right, like if the whole thing is that like okay, that's new Terra and like this is the property of Terraform Labs and that still doesn't have outstanding debts that they have to pay somewhere else, right? Then yeah, the question is like, do you, I guess, lock it or not? And I don't think they really need much liquidity on ETH anymore.
If I was part of a protocol that was quite busy with other things, I would be looking for a set and forget CVX solution that that manages that position basically on autopilot. Do you know of anything that offers that?
Maybe yeah, bveCVX. Maybe like I mean, if I you know think that makes a lot of sense. Take some of it like I would hold and try to like wait till it goes back up and like sell, right? Like I'm sure that there are other assets that would be more useful to Terraform Labs without a stable coin on ETH, which I don't think they have anymore, right? And so I think it's a good investment. I think like for almost anyone, like unless it's not the best time to be like selling Convex, right? So like if it's a long-term position and you want to exit, then the thing to do is to like keep it liquid, which bveCVX does keep it somewhat liquid. But again, I don't think that you should be expecting to exit with more than like 100,000 every few weeks. Maybe that changes, but like there's some limitations there, and it's certainly a good place to earn. It's a good place to set and forget. So yeah, I don't know. If I were Terraform Labs, I'd maybe put like 25 to 50% in bveCVX and then keep the other half liquid and try to like sell it on the way up.
Let's just hit one more of these. You've got Wonderland on the list. I think that's number like 8 or 9. What do you think Wonderland's going to do?
I don't know. I just stopped paying attention to that whole like debacle. So I no comment. Do you have any
Okay.
thoughts?
No, I have no idea. Um,
I mean, I'm sure redacted will relock, right? Like beyond like yeah, like just yeah. I mean, it's just clear.
But let me ask you this. So like the other thing that you would be looking at to find a valuation, I'm looking at the Vodium yields for each round. So like is that what you would be looking at to say if you were kind of a cold calculating rational DAO, you'd be looking to say how much is each CVX gonna net me in bribes, and how have you been tracking that? Like how have those numbers been trending? Do you think it's going to kind of
Um,
stabilize at a lower level or start going back
so
up, or do you have any forecasts there?
well, that's the thing. I think for most DAOs, right, their goal isn't they're not holding CVX to farm bribes. Like Badger's somewhat unique like that. I guess Redacted kind of is, but they're doing like private bribes, and maybe Rook is. I'm not sure, but I think for most DAOs, if they're holding CVX, it's to like vote for their own liquidity. So the question is more, how much yields does it generate, right? And I think like we looked last week, and it takes about at current prices and emissions and whatnot, right? It takes about 16 months for right now for one CVX to like pay for itself in emissions that are directed, right? But again, then the question is like the ecosystem's very depressed right now. Like over the first kind of big wave of the curve wars, which is when Convex was like pumping out of a lot of emissions, right? That allowed a lot of stable coins like Frax and Terra and whatnot to get really big because there's a lot of emissions, and it allowed everything to scale, right? And now that's all shrank down a lot, and there's a lot of FUD. But in the end, like I think what exists, there's still an incredible amount of fees, and like the yields on CVX CRV are pretty good. So yeah, I don't know. Like to me, it's very much like a wait and see thing, right? A lot of it has to do with the price of curve, frankly, because there's more curve emissions in convex now, and that's going to become, like stronger and stronger. And I'm still long term pretty bullish on curve. Like I think, like curve is a great protocol, and they have a good solution to a problem, and they enable stable coins. And yeah, I think like DeFi needs to get a lot more focused on responsibility and sustainability and whatnot. But like this is good tech that like people are going to continue to develop, and like that whole system works well.
Just to bring this section to a close, it sounds like from going through this little exercise we've done, we think that the heavy sell story is probably a bit oversold at this point. Like it's a bit overdone,
I don't
and
know.
we don't expect it to giga nuke
I
yet.
don't know. I mean, like, so we talked here about, so let's think about, like, we looked at these top holders, right? So that's 4, 10, 12. So yeah, I think we looked at about half of the CVX, right? Like, my question is, like, what's the other half going to do? Like, what's everybody else going to do, right? How many, like funds like made an investment and are done, or how many like whales, or, like, and then on the other side, like, how many people are wanting to acquire CVX and waiting to see what happens, right? And so I really don't know. I mean, the only reason I would say I don't expect it to giga nuke is because bveCVX is closing or trading close to peg, and that usually doesn't. And it just came back to that, and so that usually indicates not like the maximum amount of sell and FUD pressure on convex, but this is also like very unprecedented.
All right, so let's do this. Let me try to assimilate everything that we've talked about and kind of distill it down into a pitch for bveCVX, and you tell me if it's on the right track or if I've left anything out. All right, so Curve is an AMM, which is the backbone of DeFi. Billions and billions of dollars are traded through Curve every week, and it's especially important because it helps stablecoins stay at peg. And the way it does that is by emitting its own native token, Curve, to reward people to deposit their stablecoins into these pools. And Convex is a layer built on top of that, which has, through some clever tokenomic design, been able to amass voting power over Curve. So Convex gives you kind of like leverage votes over Curve. So they can control basically which of these pools get deeper liquidity. And because of that, there's an incredibly powerful need for DAOs to have this Convex token because they can vote for rewards going to these pools, which helps their token have liquidity, which helps their stablecoin stay at peg. And this is basically the kind of way that you get your stablecoin to be adopted throughout DeFi. If the economic rewards for holding CVX, because this is so valuable, protocols have started bribing CVX holders for their votes, because the way it works is you vote for these pools with your CVX, and now DAOs are literally paying in their own native token to CVX holders for these bribes, and that takes place through the Vodium protocol. But there's a catch. If you are a CVX holder, you have to every 2 weeks participate in these votes, and then you have to claim the tokens that you get as your bribes. And you may not be bullish on that token, or you may just get such a small amount that you're going to be paying a lot in gas fees, and it doesn't make sense if you're a small holder, both on a workload side and for the kind of gas economics of it. So that's where bveCVX comes in. So all you have to do is you buy Convex, you stake it on Badger, you deposit it in Badger, and in the bveCVX vault. And what we do is we lock it for you in Convex governance, and then we figure out the most economically powerful combination of bribes, not just the dollar value, but also can this be sold in a trustless and decentralized manner. And we compound that all for you back into more bveCVX. So 75% is compounded back into bveCVX, 25% is compounded into Badger token. So what it looks like from a UI point of view is you would deposit your Convex on Badger, and then on autopilot, the Convex is auto compounding for you, and you would periodically have to claim your Badger and also CVX CRV through the Badger reward system called the Badger tree. So a little reminder button will pop up in the upper right of the corner, and you'll be able to claim that there. But wait, there's more. We are in a, possibly a crypto bear market. Crazy stuff is happening, and in a bear market, who wants to have their tokens locked up for 16 weeks? So we've built in a little exit liquidity provision into bveCVX. So there's a curve pool that contains CVX and bveCVX, and some of the bribes are going to keep that pool at peg so that there will be a limited amount of exit liquidity for users who wish to exit early. We have a mechanism for keeping that pool topped up and in balance, so there's not going to be a lot of slippage. But it's by no means like if everyone wanted to exit this pool, it's that would be too much. But it certainly is better than nothing. So when you put that all together, you've got a new UI that's coming out, and you have basically a set it and forget it layer of managing this convex position, so you get the economic benefits of holding convex without having to do the work. But that is all great. But what's coming up on June 30th is a potential um, market disruption, which was caused by this bug. There was some bug in the convex code that had to they required all the convex to become unlocked, which was not planned. So there was kind of a bunch of craziness. But now you have this kind of like perfect storm. A ton of convex is going to unlock. People, some people have been heavily shorting it in anticipation that it's going to dump. Some people are potentially, chomping at the bit to buy it. You can see the borrow rates that people are paying on Aave to get into this trade. So if you believe in this thesis, if you think that Curve is going to be a backbone of DeFi going forward through the next cycle and beyond, and you're bullish on that, the way to play it is through convex. And if you don't want a part-time job of managing your convex position, we strongly encourage you to take a look at bveCVX.
Yeah, it sounds great. It's a mouthful, isn't it, man?
Yeah, I want to go through and
No,
if we can get that to a 30-second commercial.
yeah, good
But
luck.
yeah, that's
Good luck. But yeah, that's the gist of it, right? And yeah, I mean, I think the 30-second commercial is like convex is cheap. We expect convex to be cheap. It already is cheap. It's probably going to get cheaper. Um, Curve is an old protocol that's done well, that's gone through some hard times recently, and it's on a super discount. CVX is about to go through another hard time, right? And yeah, if you're looking for an investment and you kind of believe in like stable coins to some extent, and to like the fact that people are going to keep trading them, and to the fact that like Curve is a great solid platform that is built to be sustainable and last over a long time, then yeah, like this is the time to buy. And bveCVX gives you a way to just like pop it in and forget about it and like deal with it later on when you want to.
awesome. So, final question I've got for you. There was one feature that was really or highly in demand, which is the ability to deposit your bveCVX and get leverage. We had it as part of the Badger pool on Rari. We ended up turning it off, but we've had requests from community members to get that back going. Number one, is there any potential for using it as collateral that's going to come back, or if that's not in the cards, any plans to develop this any further? Any other features coming down the road that people could look forward to, or is basically, are we at kind of like the steady state for bveCVX here?
I mean, I think so. Liquidity, right? Like Rari is still paused completely, as far as I know. And yeah, I don't think we're looking to like switch back on borrowing right away there. In my mind, like what we need to find is a CDP that can do the same thing. So like someone like MIM, or like Inverse has one, or I don't know. Like we need to find maybe another partner there, or give Rari quite a bit more time to like really restructure their operations and like demonstrate that like their processes are good and whatnot. So like I think that's not going to happen in the near term. I think maybe in the next month, like when we get some more time, and like if there's somebody in the community that wants to, right? Like there's a lot of due diligence that needs to happen. But if we can find the right partner, it's super interesting to do, not just for bveCVX, but for all Badger vaults. And then the issue with bveCVX is really like the ability to liquidate it, right? So like sometimes that pool is not very liquid, and if at that point a liquidation happens, like you kind of get in trouble with the way that the Rari system works, and you can end up with some bad debt. And we ended up in situations where like if a liquidation would have happened, there was definitely way more in the pool, in the Rari pool, than there was in the liquidity pool, right? And so that kind of made us think about it a little more. So I think the two things that need to happen are we need to find the right partner, and then we need to find a private liquidator, right? We need to know that like there's the capacity to like, hey, if this pool is like either way off peg, or if there's a liquidation that like comes up for, up to X amount, that there's somebody that's gonna fill that. And so like once we're sure that the capacity for liquidation is there, and we find the right partner, like rock and roll. And I hope we figure it out in Q3. but I'm not 100% sure. I'm not like confident that we will. It's definitely something we'll focus on.
Cool. What about anything else coming down the road for bveCVX?
I mean, not that's the beautiful thing about bveCVX, right? Like it's proven it works. Like, no, we're not making a lot of changes, right? We're making a few UX changes to help people better understand how it works. There's a little bit of work going on in the background to like further decentralize and automate like voting and bribe processing, but like functionally, no. Like bveCVX is what it is, like, and it's been working for a long time, and there's people in it, and they like it, and yeah, like rock on, like ape in.
All right. So this podcast is going out. The unlockening is the 30th. I'm going to be traveling, but we are going to try to get a all-star Badger cast, you 1500 Badger, or some other special guests on some kind of a Twitter Spaces or live event around this unlockening, so we can kind of give you a play-by-play of what's going on. I'm really looking forward to it. So I hope if you're listening, you will join us on the 30th. And if you're looking for a cozy place to stash your CVX in the spare market, that you will take a look at bveCVX.
Yeah, check it out. Go bveCVX.
All right. Thanks, Tritium. BadgerCast is a production of Badger DAO. Real quick before you go, please leave us a like or review on your podcast app of choice so that other Badgers can find us. And if you want to learn more or contribute to Badger DAO, the best place to get started is in our Discord server. Just go to www.badger.com and click the Discord link at the bottom. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.